imagine for a second, you're stepping into the gym, you load up the squat rack, and you just push yourself to absolute sweating, muscle-shaking exhaustion for 2 brutal hours.
Oh, yeah, just completely draining yourself.
Right, exactly. You put in the work, but then you walk out to the parking lot, you sit in your car, and you immediately eat a dozen glazed donuts. And you do this every single day.
Wow. Well, I mean, obviously, you're not going to see any physical results from that.
No, not at all. Because that one deeply ingrained bad habit is, completely canceling out all of your hard work. And now, think about your mind. Because that is exactly what so many of us are doing with our mental energy every single day, especially in academia.
It's such a stark image, right?
Right.
But it really captures the reality of mental exhaustion perfectly. I mean, we spend an enormous amount of time trying to build good habits, reading the latest research, studying late into the night, trying to practice positive thinking. But all of those good habits are essentially useless if our mental bad habits are just quietly draining our energy in the background, like eating those donuts.
Yes, exactly. And look, if you are a graduate student in India listening to this right now, maybe taking a brief walk away from a really stubborn data set or a towering stack of literature reviews, you know this exhaustion intimately.
Oh, totally.
You are dealing with intense academic rigor and, heavy expectations from your family, fierce competition. So today in our deep dive, we are taking a look at a framework developed by psychotherapist Amy Morin. She wrote about 13 specific things mentally strong people simply do not do.
Right, and it's such a powerful list.
It is. And our mission today is to translate those concepts into really practical tools for your academic life.
Yeah, and I think what gives this specific framework so much weight is the crucible it was forged in. Like, Morin didn't develop these ideas in a sterile academic vacuum,
Right. It wasn't just a research project for her.
No, not at all. Over a just devastatingly short few years, she lost her mother, then her husband unexpectedly, and then her father-in-law.
Just unimaginably difficult.
Yeah, she was drowning in grief. And she identified these 13 mental traps not to publish a paper, but as a literal survival mechanism to keep her own mind from collapsing during that trauma.
Wow. She realized that, mental strength isn't just about what you do, right? It's almost entirely about what you refuse to do.
Exactly.
It requires this three-pronged approach of managing your thoughts, regulating your emotions, and behaving productively. But if we are talking about stopping those mental bad habits, putting down the emotional donuts, so to speak, we have to look at the biggest, most caloric trap of all.
And absolutely, the big one.
Yeah, and that is feeling sorry for yourself, wallowing in victimhood.
Victimhood is, it's a fascinating psychological trap. Because initially, it feels comforting, right? It absolves you of responsibility.
Yeah, it feels like a warm blanket at first.
Exactly. But it is an absolute black hole for your mental energy. There is this case study from the source material that illustrates this perfectly. A young boy named Jack was hit by a school bus.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, it resulted in multiple severe fractures to both of his legs. And his parents, out of very understandable terror and love, they wrapped him in bubble wrap.
Right, which any parent would want to do.
Of course. They kept him home, shielded him from any potential harm, and just constantly expressed pity for his situation.
And ironically, that protection turned him into a deeply unhappy kid. He internalized the idea that he was a fragile victim of the universe, and he became really irritable and depressed.
Right, until a new therapist took over the case and completely shattered that narrative. The therapist walked in, looked at him, and didn't offer an ounce of pity.
Wow, just completely flipped the script.
Completely. The therapist said, "I have been so excited to meet you. I have never in my life met a kid who could fight a school bus and win."
That is so good.
Isn't it? They spent their sessions writing a comic book together called How to Beat a School Bus, and Jack actually drew himself in his wheelchair wearing a superhero cape.
That is amazing because, he didn't change the physical reality of his broken legs, but he completely changed his psychological identity.
Exactly.
He went from being a victim to being a survivor.
Yeah.
And that connects so deeply to how we handle the people who hurt us.
Yeah.
Retaining your personal power is a huge part of this, like the incredible story of Stephen McDonald.
Right, the New York City police officer.
Yeah, he was shot and paralyzed by a teenager.
Yeah.
And McDonald made the active choice to forgive his shooter.
Which is just astounding.
It is, but he didn't do it for the shooter's sake. He did it because holding onto that rage would mean giving a teenager permanent power over his emotional state.
Right, and when we talk about personal power in psychology, we're really talking about your locus of control. When you are consumed by anger or resentment towards someone who wronged you, you are experiencing a chronic physiological stress
Your
response.
body is basically under attack from itself.
Exactly. Your amygdala is firing. Your cortisol is spiking. By holding on to that grudge, your brain remains literally neurologically tethered to the person who harmed you. MacDonald recognized that forgiveness was the only way to cut the tether and reclaim his internal locus of control.
Okay, wait. I need to pause and challenge this a little bit,
Sure.
especially thinking about a graduate student listening right now. Telling someone to just, reclaim their locus of control and not take it personally when their PhD advisor completely shreds their thesis draft, that feels almost impossible.
Oh, it is incredibly difficult.
Right. Because that advisor isn't a teenager on the street. They're an authority figure who literally holds the keys to students' funding, their future career, and sometimes even their visa status. How on earth is a student supposed to not take that intensely personal?
Well, it is incredibly difficult, which is exactly why it requires deliberate mental strength. The trick here isn't to pretend the advisor has no institutional power over your career. I mean, they absolutely do.
Right. You can't ignore reality.
No, you can't. But the trick is recognizing they have zero power over your self-worth unless you hand it to them. It comes down to reframing your internal language.
Okay. What does that look like in practice?
Well, if you walk out of that meeting thinking, my advisor makes me feel stupid, then you have handed over your emotional remote control. You have made them the author of your reality.
So what is the alternative script? Because, you can't just pretend they said you were a genius when they just tore apart your work.
No, you examine the criticism analytically. You change the script to, my advisor delivered harsh feedback on my methodology. I am choosing how to respond to this information.
Ah, okay. I see the shift there.
Right. You are separating the data, the critique of the methodology from your identity. You extract whatever is academically useful from their harshness, and you just completely reject the implication that their tone dictates your value as a researcher or, as a human being.
That makes a lot of sense. But it's one thing to control your internal narrative when someone is actively tearing you down. But what happens when the threat isn't an attack, but someone else's success?
Whoa, that's a huge one.
Yeah, because once you manage your own sense of power, the next massive drain on your mental energy is getting tangled up in what your peers are doing.
You are talking about the trap of comparison and resentment.
Exactly.
From an evolutionary standpoint, human beings are wired to monitor our status within the tribe. If someone else gets more resources, our primitive brain registers it as a literal threat to our own survival.
Right. But in modern academia, this translates into viewing the world as a zero-sum game, which is incredibly destructive. Like the case of Dan from the book.
Yes, Dan's story is so common.
Right. Dan had everything, a beautiful home, a loving family. Yet at neighborhood barbecues, he was perpetually miserable. He spent the entire time comparing his house and his car to his wealthier neighbors.
He was completely trapped in a cycle of resentment.
He really was. There is a saying that resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. The neighbors were just happily eating potato salad, completely unaffected, while Dan was slowly poisoning his own happiness.
It's so true.
And he only escaped that cycle when he stopped looking over the fence and reconnected with his own values. He realized his primary definition of success was his wife being able to stay home with their children, not having the biggest bank account on the block.
Right, and the inverse of resenting people is trying to please them. People-pleasing is really just another way of handing over your locus of control.
Oh, that's a really good point.
Consider Megan, right? She was an overwhelmed mother who essentially functioned as the neighborhood volunteer. She said yes to every bake sale, every favor, every committee.
Just spreading herself way too thin.
Exactly. She was exhausted and deeply unhappy because she was living according to everyone else's priorities. And she finally broke the cycle with a single clarifying realization.
Which was?
That saying yes to someone else inherently means saying no to her own family.
That is a brutal but necessary boundary to set. Like, compare Megan's initial state to Jim Buckmaster, the CEO of Craigslist.
Oh, the Wall Street story.
Yeah. For years, Wall Street investors hammered him. They pressured him to monetize the site, run ads, and change the entire business model to maximize profits. They literally called him crazy.
But he didn't cave.
He didn't. He just kept saying no. Because he knew his core value was providing a simple, free, public service, and he refused to dilute that just to make other people happy.
Which brings us to the core mechanism of avoiding both resentment and people-pleasing, and that is knowing your top values. If you cannot immediately articulate your top 5 core values, you will inevitably end up living your life according to someone else's.
Right.
Mentally strong people just don't view other people's success as a threat, and they don't view other people's disappointment as a failure.
So let's apply this directly to the listener, to the highly competitive environment of a university lab. I mean, it is remarkably easy to resent a peer who gets published in a major journal before you do.
Oh, absolutely.
Or, on the flip side, to completely burn yourself out, taking on extra tasks just to please a demanding senior researcher.
Yeah.
How do you survive that ecosystem? Is there a way to be a good team player without becoming a people pleaser?
Well, yes, by understanding that energy is finite. Look, if a peer publishes a great paper and you spend 3 days stewing in jealousy, you have just robbed your own research of 3 days of mental energy.
You're just drinking the poison again.
Exactly. Mentally strong researchers view their peers as resources, not rivals. They celebrate the success, they read the paper, and maybe they ask that peer to review their next draft.
Right. Use it to your advantage.
And regarding the pressure to people please as well, if taking on a senior researcher's busy work forces you to abandon your own thesis timeline, you have to find the courage to say no. Cooperation is vital, but subjugation is not.
I love that. Cooperation, not subjugation. Okay, so we have navigated the emotional traps of dealing with ourselves and the traps of dealing with our peers. Let's look at dealing with the actual work.
The fun part.
Right, the data, the experiments, the writing. The work itself is going to involve failure. But the way mentally strong people process failure is fundamentally different from the rest of us.
It really comes down to what psychologists call grit. That perseverance and passion for long-term goals. Studies consistently show that grit is a far more accurate predictor of long-term success than a high IQ.
Really? More than IQ?
Yes. A person with average intelligence who engages in a decade of deliberate, focused practice will almost always surpass a natural genius who quits the moment things get difficult.
Wow. And this plays out the story of Susan, right? She fell out of college early on.
Yeah, she did.
And for years, she carried this heavy identity. She thought, I am a college dropout, therefore I am not smart enough. She internalized a temporary event as a permanent state of being.
Which is so common.
It is. But years later, she took a hard, objective look at that failure. She realized her brain was fine, her systems were flawed, she had zero study skills, she didn't know how to manage her time, and she rarely even went to class.
Right, it was a behavioral issue, not an intelligence issue.
Exactly. Once she stopped labeling herself as stupid and started labeling her habits as ineffective, she went back to school and excelled.
Susan had initially fallen into a state of learned helplessness.
Learned helplessness. Okay, what exactly is that?
Well, it's a psychological phenomenon where your brain basically decides that because you couldn't control the outcome of one negative event, you have no control over any future events.
Oh, wow. So you just give up.
Pretty much. Your brain tries to conserve energy by simply giving up in the face of perceived permanent threats. This is why expecting immediate results is so incredibly dangerous.
Because when you don't get them, you feel helpless.
Right. Take Marcy, for example. She read dozens of self-help books, but never actually changed her life because she was looking for a magic pill. Or Christy, who promised herself every single morning she wouldn't yell at her kids, but she never built an actual system to manage her temper.
So when they failed, their brains basically told them, see, it's impossible. Stop trying. Let me bring in an analogy here for our listener. In a university lab, when an experiment fails, a good graduate student doesn't just cry over the beaker and say, I'm a terrible scientist. I am fundamentally broken.
I would hope not.
Right. They apply the scientific method. They check the temperature. They check the chemical purity. They isolate the variables to see what went wrong. But when it comes to our own lives, a rejected paper, a failed exam, we abandon the scientific method and jump straight to, I am a failure.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. And the psychological tool required to actually apply the scientific method to your own life is called self-compassion.
Self-compassion. I feel like that term gets a bad rap sometimes.
It really does. We often mistake self-compassion for weakness or, just letting ourselves off the hook. But it is the exact opposite.
Right. How so?
Well, self-compassion is the mechanism that downregulates your body's threat response. When you face a failure, your brain wants to panic. By viewing the failure kindly and objectively, you calm the amygdala enough that your prefrontal cortex, the logical, analytical part of your brain can actually get to work.
Oh, that is fascinating.
Yeah, you literally can't isolate the variables of your failure if you are busy attacking your own identity.
Because your brain is too busy defending itself from you.
Exactly.
Okay, so if you are going to use the scientific method on your own emotions and your own failures, you need a quiet laboratory to do it. You cannot do that level of deep processing while scrolling on your phone or surrounded by noise.
No, you absolutely cannot.
Which brings us to the final, sustaining practices of mental strength.
Yeah.
Cultivating solitude and embracing humility.
The irony of modern life is that we are, more connected than ever, yet we are terrified of our own minds. There's a fascinating irony in how we treat sleep, for instance.
Oh, like Vanessa's story.
Yes. Take the case of Vanessa. She suffered from crippling insomnia. She tried everything, but the root cause was actually quite simple. She spent every waking second of her day surrounded by noise, podcasts, networking, screens.
She actively avoided being alone with her thoughts all day.
Right. So the moment her head hit the pillow, her brain finally had a quiet room to process all the anxieties of her life, and it just went into overdrive.
We constantly confuse being alone with being lonely.
Really do.
Loneliness is a painful lack of connection. But solitude is a deliberate restorative choice. Taking just 10 minutes a day to sit in silence without a screen, without a book, without a goal, that is how you charge your mental battery.
Yes. If you don't give your brain time to file away the data of your life, the files just pile up on the floor until you literally trip over them.
That is a great visual. And without that quiet reflection, you lose perspective, right? You start to drift toward an entitlement mentality.
Oh, entitlement is a massive trap. Consider a young professional named Lucas. Throughout his childhood, his parents constantly told him he was special, a natural-born leader.
Which sounds nice, but it backfired.
Completely. He internalized this so deeply that when he entered the workforce, he expected to be handed promotions and special treatment simply for existing. He didn't think he needed to put in the hard work because he believed his inherent specialness was enough.
Wow. It's almost the equivalent of a student who has faced genuine, profound hardships in their past. Maybe severe financial struggles or personal tragedies back in India.
Right.
They arrive in a graduate program and subconsciously feel that because life has been so incredibly hard on them, the universe or their professor owes them a top grade to balance the scales, regardless of their current academic output.
It is a harsh truth to swallow, but your past struggles, no matter how valid and painful, do not excuse you from present effort.
They really don't.
An entitlement mentality is blinding. It ruins teamwork because you lack empathy for your peers, and it sets you up for constant disappointment because reality simply does not care about what you feel you are owed. Humility is the antidote here.
Humility.
Yes. Humility is the profound understanding that the universe owes you absolutely nothing. A smooth path is just not guaranteed.
When you combine those two things, the humility to accept that life isn't fair and the work is solely your responsibility, with the silent solitude required to actually process your thoughts, you create a foundation that can withstand almost anything academia throws at you.
To synthesize all of this for our listener, building mental strength is not about acting tough. It really is the mastery of resource allocation.
Resource allocation, like a mental budget.
Exactly. You wake up every single day with a finite budget of mental energy. If you spend 40% of it on resenting your lab mate's publication and 30% of it obsessing over your advisor's tone of voice, you have almost nothing left for your actual thesis.
You've eaten all the donuts.
You've eaten all the donuts. Mental strength is choosing exactly where to spend that energy. It is putting down the heavy weights of self-pity and people-pleasing so you can carry the actual burden of your research.
That is perfectly said. Remember that this academic journey you are on is a marathon, not a sprint. You do not need a magic pill, and you do not need to be a perfectly optimized machine today.
No one is.
Right. You just need to apply the scientific method to your own mind. Isolate the variables, practice self-compassion when an experiment fails, and keep moving forward.
Absolutely.
But before you get back to your reading or that stubborn data set, I want to leave you with a concept to mull over.
Let's hear it.
We talked heavily about the locus of control today. The truth is, trying to control the uncontrollable, your advisor's mood, the peer review committee's timeline, the immediate success of your lab work actually spikes your anxiety over time.
It absolutely does.
So what if you accepted right now that your true locus of control is incredibly small? It only contains your thoughts, your emotions, and your behavior today.
Nothing else.
Exactly. If you suddenly stop spending energy trying to control everything outside that tiny circle How much previously wasted mental energy could you suddenly unlock?
So much of it.
Imagine what you could achieve by pouring all of that freed up, hyper-focused energy directly into your own passions and your own research. Take a deep breath, leave the donuts in the parking lot, and go write your thesis.